Login accepted.
All right. So today we're gonna go over RvB Debrief, kind of the second debrief, but a little more in depth. So yeah. Also a reminder that we don't have a Friday workshop. We do have another announcement. So first and foremost, make sure you register for Tech Symposium. That's due on April 5th. And Tech Symposium will happen April 12th at Mount SAC. And you'll get to see some of the guest speakers there that we've announced so far. And there will be a CTF. All right, so in replacement of a Friday workshop this week, we'll have a movie night social. So that's from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. There should be movies, games, and free food. And yeah, so just enjoy your last Friday with us before spring break. Then another announcement, ITC is their sign up deadline is coming up. I believe it's the April 4th. Yeah, so on April 4th it's due. If you're interested on any of the categories, IT security, digital forensics, I heard digital forensics has like really like low participation. So, you might be able to get easy money if you sign in for forensics. Not my words though. And then just a quick shout out to I think it was like Big Time Broncos or something. They have a guest speaker event this Thursday in this building 163 in room 2020, and that'll happen during U hour. All right, so I didn't want to jump right into the environment yet. Just a quick recap. RVB, we had, I'd say it was a pretty good competition besides the scoring engine dying during lunch. But we had a total of 21 teams competing. And let me pull up. Actually, no, I'm not. Um, so the environment, I'm gonna go over what was in each environment. Um, if you catch some of the stuff that we implemented, and go over the injects and what you were supposed to write, or what we were expecting you to write from the injects. So as you can see right here, you had your 5 machines. Do Ubuntu 22, Cyberstan, then your CentOS Fourier Prime, your Windows Server 2019 Angels Venture, your Windows 10 Melvelen, and then Windows Server 2016 Meridia. So this is some of the themes we implemented over the environment. We had some outdated software. I'll go over more in depth of what we did, but we had bad password practice, some permission issues or misconfiguration, unauthorized services. So that means, services that didn't have to be running, which you could have turned off. And then internal threat, which you'll see later. So first, we have CyberStan. Elias, you want to talk some of what you did?
All right, so this one was the one I dev'd on. The main services that were being scored were NTP, which is just a timekeeping server, and FTP, transfer server, basically. The vulnerabilities were mainly in the FTP server. There wasn't much I could do with the time one, but essentially on the FTP server, what I did was I turned off all the security features so that if you logged in as John Cyberstrike, the main user on the box, you could essentially get into the rest of the system because the FTP directory would not have been partitioned from the rest of the system, meaning the root directory, everything else, as well as bind shells. I'm not sure anyone really utilized those in the competition, right? No, no, bind shells. So they were there, but not really used at all. And then there was the cron job, adding root users. That's just a scheduled job that happens. Uh,
Mhm.
and then for some reason it was accidentally commented out. So that wasn't a thing either. The one thing that I did do that was a little silly was I switched Vim and Nano. So if you went to Nano into a file, it would pull up Vim and vice versa. But yeah, that's about it.
Yeah. So, as you said, NTP, kind of think of it as like it was looking for a server, and then that server has like a time. It keeps the time, so it'll get the time from that server. Kind of new concept. That's why we don't have a check for it. That's why we only just check if you can ping the machine. And then FTP couldn't be scored because scoring engine issue. But yeah. And then fortunately the cron job didn't run because we commented it out by accident before cloning. But yeah, thank you, Elias. All right, for a prime. This one I personally did. So it was scoring a HTTP WordPress, and it was also being scored by DNS. Let me hop on the WordPress real quick. So the WordPress was running WordPress 5.0, and if you search it up, it's really there's a lot of exploits with it. Um, I think there's like cross-site scripting exploit with it, right? That's what I saw. But yeah, if you search it up, there's a lot of like CVEs on it. And then it was kind of hard for Red Team to actually hit it because I think if you hit it externally, it wouldn't load that well. And then DNS, that one's a little interesting this time. So those DNS records, they aren't stored, they aren't stored locally. Instead, those records are getting from Angel's Venture, which is your domain controller, which we can talk about later. But it's really important. It was really important that Prime and Angel's Venture were able to kind of communicate with each other and making sure that Angel's Venture was up. Because if your Angel's Venture machine went down, that means your DNS went down for this machine, and you're not going to get scored for that machine. And then, um, as for other vulnerabilities, there was a web shell. I use a Pony web shell, which, if you haven't used it before, is just a PHP application. So if you go on, all you had to do was get the IP address and then go to the file path of the file path of the web shell. If you just put on your URL on a web browser, you're able to get a web shell from the web browser and you could just type whatever. And that was running on root or it was on the it was on the Apache user. So I don't know how useful it would have been for Red Team, but they could have done some stuff. And then I think the most important part is the no authentication. So I turned off PAM, which is responsible for making sure that it authorizes like passwords and other stuff like that. So turning that off means that Red Team was able to just like not use a password at all and just like automatically log in into the machine from like right after grace period. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Anyone have any questions so far? Nope. Okay.
Yeah,
All right, Angels.
I have a question.
Yes.
How is the pony or the pawn configured? There was a file, I can't remember which, it was a file called Pony or Pawnee, in one of the, I think it was, I can't remember which one it was, which box it was, but there was
Mhm.
a file, and we were looking at it, and it was created at the same time a user was created, and we were wondering if that was a part of, I guess, your injection or a part of, how the root access. Do you like reference what I'm talking about? Wish I have more
Yes.
details.
Yes. So what you were supposed to, I guess it's kind of like prior knowledge, because it was in the WordPress directory, if I'm not mistaken. Um, are you asking like what you should have done when you saw it?
Yeah, that's a yes.
Okay. Um, I was gonna say like you try running it yourself, but I don't think that's like safe thing to do. Um, I guess if you see something like you're not too sure what it is, and you might find it like a little suspicious, try Googling it. I'll say Google it first, and then sometimes like these tool links, there's a lot of like they're usually on GitHub and is pretty well documented. But if you search it up and saw that it was like a web shell, then I probably would have just like deleted it. Does that answer the
Got
question? Yeah.
yeah, got that. I understand. Thanks.
Hmm. All right. So Angel's Venture, it was your Windows Server 2019. And I guess this one you couldn't really score after the scoring engine broke, but it was the primary domain controller. And what that means is all your domain accounts inside cyberstrike.corps were located here. So if your Angels Venture went down, that means your domain admins, domain users wouldn't work anymore, and your DNS wouldn't work anymore. So that LDAP score services was supposed to score your domain users and see if it was able to run. And then um, there wasn't really a MS Exchange vulnerability set up. I think for the most part, it was just if Red Team got into that machine, then and they were able to take it down, then it would cause your other services to go down. So that was kind of like the centralized portion of it. And next up is your Windows 10. Windows 10, honestly, you could have turned it off. Um, because vulnerability is nothing scored on it, nothing's dependent on it. Firewall was disabled. There was a vulnerable Outlook. Um, and then some of the troll things was just like you can't use command line, you can't use PowerShell, you can't use anything. So if you kind of like you see that it's not being scored, and then it's kind of just by itself, I would I would have probably just turned it off. But Red Team could have used it as like a jumping point. So if they got into the Windows 10, probably could have gone into your other machines. But yeah, that was Windows 10. And then Meridia. I'm talking about. I'm gonna bring Natalie Tran over.
So Meridia was having DNS and SMB scored. So yeah. Some of the vulnerabilities that were built in with it, so it came with the box, is Eternal Blue and Zero Logon. So Eternal Blue is something that can be exploited or that can exploit SMB. So you would disable SMB version 1 because that's the version of SMB that has Eternal Blue on it. And for Zero Logon, there's a patch that you could have installed. So that would have kind of been fixed. Um, the box also had RDP, so you could have disabled that. The shared C drive was a part of the SMB share. And do you know if that was scoring content?
I think so.
Okay. So because that was scoring content, hmm,
Can't really do much.
yeah, that was crazy. I don't actually think SSH was enabled, but you could have turned that off.
Yeah, so I think from past experience and um like past people who've done like boot camp, um if you see Windows Server 2016, it's really like the default, you should instantly associate it with internal blue. That's kind of like the main thing about Windows Server 2016. Um, maybe also for every Windows machine, just make sure you double check. That should be like your top priority is to check if it's vulnerable to internal blue. So make sure you turn off SMB version 1 and yeah. And then DNS was of course replicated from Angel's Venture. So if your Angel's Venture went down, then your Forta Prime went down, and then Meridia went down. So, all right, so kind of just some design flaws on our end when making the environment. So, as we said, the cron jobs in the Linux boxes didn't run because of user error. So, I mean, there weren't any extra users that could have been created over time, but there were some extra users. And then SSH wasn't required because if it was required to be scored, then it would have meant that your SSH had to be up. So you could have easily turned that off, and then red team has to find a different way to get in. And then finally, there were some outdated services like SMB v1. You could just turn that off. WordPress, you might have to reinstall WordPress, get the content, and stuff like that. And then I think FTP, you just had to install a new version and then make sure that the directory and the content that's looking for is still the same. So you could have easily, maybe besides WordPress, but I think SMB and FTP could have easily updated and then just make sure you reconfigure and all that stuff. All right, before I go into injects, anyone have any questions about the environment or if they want to know more about anything else?
I'd like to know a little bit more about approaches to cleaning it quickly. Like, what are approaches that people have taken that you saw that were successful?
Cleaning the services or just like the boxes?
Just generally overall about the boxes, if you could run into like 1 or 2 points about each of the boxes, like what was a fast way to assess the box and understand it even more so?
Mm, I would say for this first one here, I think getting a quick understanding of this would have been looking at the ports that had open for it. Um, I think FTP is running on 20 and 21. Yeah, so first you want to check, I think for all machines actually, you want to check which ports open. I think with this one, it would have been port 123 for NTP, and then port 20 for FTP. And then you want to make sure you want to like drill down on each of those services. So if you looked at FTP and did like a system CTO status, you would have seen the version, but I think for if you're like a little inexperienced, then you might not have like noticed that it was like vulnerable. But I would say for that one, you would have checked your ports. And then for forward prime, this one's a little harder, I would say. Again, if you're not as experienced, or if this is your first time, then version or software version might not be as like noticeable. But I would say, I think when you log in, um, you might have noticed or taken account that some of the like if you put an empty password or something, it didn't work. I think this one isn't as straightforward as the last one, but I think again, it would just probably be checking your ports and then drilling down on HTTP and the where the files are stored, and then maybe checking like which users are logged in. Then for Angel's Venture, I think this one, you just gotta you gotta understand what's its purpose as a domain controller. It controls, well, the domain, and then but also it might have some other services that are running. So when you open up Server Manager, you would have saw DNS that's running, and then like a file share that was running. I don't think there was a file share, but yeah, I think you would have checked like the DNS service, if it's like what's connecting to it and what's its like records and all that stuff. Then this one, I think for Windows 10, I think a good thing to note is like if you don't see the host name on the scoreboard, then it doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't matter, but you could make sure that it isn't. You just have to make sure that it doesn't depend on anything else. I think for Windows servers or for Windows machines, always check if a firewall is on or not. Because if you turn on firewall, then for the most part, it will keep you safe from any attacks besides like any of the score services. And then for Windows Server 2016, I think a good thing to note would have been just Eternal Blue, and or it would the easiest thing to note would have been the SMB and checking which version it was running. And yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. That was really useful to think about it that way.
Yep. Any other
So,
questions?
yeah, I guess as a sense of like firewalls, right? You said check the ports to identify open ports and possible vulnerabilities. I get like you were saying, there were some ports, some services, like SSH that wasn't being scored, and we could have closed that, which would have caused the red team to have to find a different entry. And I guess there's that, right, closing ports, but there's also firewalls. I guess the opportunity to create firewalls for every different port or service that is present. I guess firewalls and closing ports, as far as are those the two main or only two options in that situation. Like I did an nmap scan, I got the ports that are open to remediate or to create hardening. Are those the only two ways to harden? Is
I
creating
think
Mhm,
I think for at the start, I think that's probably like the best remediation
mhm,
because if you like try to look at users, it might take a long time because like if that cron job was running, then you might not notice that more users are being added with root login and then no password.
mhm.
So I think with firewalls, it's probably the quickest because you could like nmap scan the whole network and see in like inventory which ports are open and which ones you need to close. So I think for like the first few like 15 minutes of grace period, I think firewall is really useful and it will probably slow down red team. But I think after that would just be checking like your services that are running that needs to be scored and then looking for holes in that configuration. And then also, I guess if you have time, make sure you inventory your users and unnecessary, making sure that unauthorized users aren't there. But I think after that, it's just really drilling down on what's on the system.
Right. And about the authorized users, I want to say it was for your prime. But I when we looked at the users and there was like multiple John cyber strikes. There's like three to four users at any one time. I kept seeing like one user get shut down. And was I keep hearing you say cron job because I'm not exactly sure what that is. I haven't looked it up yet. But is cron job the injection that was creating a new user every so often, like every couple of minutes or something like that?
Yes, it should have. Um, I'm not too sure if it was commented out, so it wasn't running.
Mhm.
But that also could have been red team. That's how would they implement persistence. So
Mhm.
if it wasn't from us, then it probably would have been from red team adding new users so they can, continue to log in.
Right. And I guess just for sake of asking, what would be, I guess, the best way to remediate that? My thought process was, try to alter maybe the user we were actively on, and then, you know, like kind of put that user to the side, and then I was just going to erase everything else. But is there any other remediations you could think?
Actually, I'll hand it over to one of our red team guys. You can talk.
So what was the question again?
So, um, John Cyberstrike, there were multiple users as John Cyberstrike. It was just spelled exactly the same way. And we were logged in as John Cyberstrike. And so um I was my question goes to one, was that a persistence where there was multiple users with the same username, which kind of confused us because we were like, oh man, I don't know which user is our user. Um, and then two, um, how would we go about remediating that where there's multiple users with the exact same name and it's our like local login? How would you go about, you know, remediating that?
So there are various ways to check if it's a bad user. One would be checking the UID of the user. So the root user UID is 0. So if within the Etsy password file, you see a duplicate user with the UID of 0, it's most likely going to be a bad user. And this is specific for Linux, by the way. I'm not sure about Windows. Um, So you could just delete it straight from the Etsy password file. I don't recall creating users with of actual users. I would just create users like Tor and Jerry. So users like that aren't actual users, so you can easily delete them. Um, but yeah, you just have to look through your Etsy password file and see what doesn't look right. Does it have an X within the Etsy password entry? Is a UID wrong or zero, etc.
Yeah, and also if you're not too sure of deleting a user, you can also edit the Etsy password, and then where it would say like slash bin slash bash, you could change it to slash sbin slash no login. So what that does is disable login, so they can't use the user. But does that answer your question, Alfred?
Yeah, yeah. You said you could go into the Etsy file and change the user login. So I basically I could have went into the Etsy file and edited from the Etsy file itself.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Hello.
Right. Yes.
Oh, I had like another addition to that. So if you're saying, oh, if you said it was added through cron, what my team did, we just deleted cron. So any vulnerabilities through cron just didn't happen for us.
Yeah. Yeah. That works too. Sometimes I don't think we'll ever do this, but sometimes a service might require cron. But you just gave me a new idea. So
What is cron, by the way, since I'm here?
so it stands usually it's called a cron job, but cron stands for chronological. I forgot the rest, but it's something chronological. So what that does is like it's like a scheduler. So it'll schedule like a command every like day, every hour, or whatever you configure it to. So should have what was supposed to happen was a new user was supposed to be added every minute, but that didn't happen.
Yeah, I remember Clemens talking about that. And the cron specifically works to schedule users, or you can use it to schedule
Um,
multiple things.
you could use it to schedule anything and multiple things actually.
You can use it to run scripts that can pretty much do anything.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. All right. For the sake of time, I'll move on to injects. So I believe this was the first inject. It was a inventory inject. So we were just kind of looking. It wasn't like supposed to be like super detailed, like you're supposed to make a graph or anything. But you should have. What we're looking for is like a table, and then having some of the some of the bullet points we were looking for. So which OS it was, what services were running, and if you could find any vulnerabilities. Um, I would say the vulnerabilities part is kind of probably the hardest, but if you try your best, if you try your best and make it look nice, then inject raters will be happy and give you points. And then I'm not too sure about the SISR number. I think it's just scoring how like severe the vulnerability is. I think it's the like a CVE number. And then inject number two, it was an incident response. So you're supposed to locate what threat was happening. And it was supposed to be the duplicated users, but I think there was only like a few, and after that weren't any. They were located on was supposed to be located on both machines. I think if you probably noted or found a cron job and noted it in your inject, we'll probably give pretty sure we give points for that. And then it was asking for steps to mitigate, so you just had to remove the users and then remove the cron job, or you could turn off cron job. But overall, inject rater said this one had the best outcome or results. And then this one was kind of, I think it was up to the competitors' like discretion. So if they saw anything like suspicious, um, anything suspicious on their machine, like if there was a red team member on the machine, or I guess here the cron job work as well. But if you found like any logs of like red team accessing your computer, or not your computer, your boxes, then we'll take it and give you points. Then number 4 was the ransomware. Yeah, so what was it? Let me read it real quick.
For the ransomware, what if you didn't get anything encrypted? Because on my team, we didn't get anything encrypted. I'm pretty sure. I didn't see anything on slash Etsy.
I guess if that's the case, then like what you should have written on the inject.
Yeah.
I think you could have just simply said, first say, I didn't get the ransomware. We like how you like what you did that might have like prevented that. So like firewalls, they couldn't
Yeah.
get to our machine and stuff like that. And then make sure you show proof.
Oh yeah, I screenshotted the Etsy file and put it in
Yeah,
there.
yeah, that's good.
Okay.
So if you give a reason, then you show proof, then that'll probably give you full points.
Okay. And for the third one, that was was that that was that the show if we got compromised, the third inject? Was that
Uh,
also the incident response? I forgot that one.
Let me see. Oh, never mind. It was just the cron job. I thought it
Oh,
was okay. Yeah, so it's just the cron job and saying that you got rid of them.
I didn't touch the con job, so maybe I didn't get points for that. Oh, we'll see.
Okay. Yeah, and then let me move on. So I think if you got ransomware, I think you were supposed to. I guess if you had ransomware, you're supposed to meet up somewhere or talk to someone. Or you could have reported that, yeah, we had the ransomware. Then the last inject, let me see. Oh, this one was the one where you went to, if you were in person, you would have talked to Vinny, and then there was like a group of people, kind of just was ransomware the frogs? They were not. I think if you had ransomware, they would have encrypted all of your files basically, and you can't use them. But no, the frogs weren't part of it. That was a separate incident. So this one was just talking to a person and then making sure you give like a full report of what you did so far and about the ransomware. This inject was mainly just to pull one person out of the environment, and we call it in CCDC, we call it like a vacation, a work vacation or something like that. So yeah, I guess we're giving the experience too. And then finally, it's just a simple survey. All you gotta do was just do the survey. And then if you did it on time, you would have gotten 100 points. It wasn't required, or actually, no, it was required. Never mind. But yeah, that should have been easy points. And then just a quick breakdown. Scores are really high. Yeah, I mean, not too bad. Anyone have any questions about the injects? scores or feedback? Is there a score breakdown
The
that sh
index were graded like during the competition.
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay.
So one tip is because injects are graded like at real time, you want to make sure they look really nice and like well formatted.
Hmm.
Because if you just give me a just like a text file and just like it's just a paragraph,
Yeah.
they're probably like less likely to like read it, or they'll read it, but they probably won't be as happy. So
Ah,
it's about pleasing the inject graders pretty much.
okay. So like good formatting.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
And then Annabelle asks if there's a score breakdown that shows inject scores. Ye Not on this graph or any graph. We could probably post that out sometime. But I think if you want more like feedback from our inject graders, you can message Sydney. She was mainly grading the injects. So yeah.
How do you get negative points?
They might have so there's a thing called SLAs. So if your service goes down for I think it's like 5 consecutive times, then that's when you start losing points. So that's probably how they got it to negative.
Thanks.
All right, any other questions?
Um, a quick question about the one of the injects. So we ended up finding the cron jobs and the file that was um running with the cron jobs, but we were trying to kill the process. Um, for that, we were trying to kill the process. Is there another, did you guys have like something else to have the process keep running? And like we tried to delete the process and we couldn't delete it. Um, we found the cron jobs though, but we were just trying to delete it and we couldn't delete it. Is there a second uh file that you guys were using to keep the file from not being killed as a process?
Um, did you delete the cron job? Or
No, basically we saw the cron jobs, but I skipped it because I noticed that the top was somebody answered me last time that the top I looked and it was empty, so I didn't mind it, but I think we were supposed to scroll down a little bit more and
yeah.
the schedule would have been on the bottom, but I was careless and I didn't look at that. Um, but then after that, a file ran that started making more users. And then, instead of trying to look for the file that was running because we found the file that was running the users,
Mhm.
but then I noticed that the variable on the program also, it was just a variable that was running, and I was looking for another file that was running that variable. So instead of looking for that file, I tried to just kill the process that was running. We just tried to kill the process that was running that file. I was just wondering if you guys had another file or whatever that process is that was running in order to keep that file up and creating users.
Um, from like from me, no. We besides that cron job that might not have besides that cron job that was supposed to be commented out or running, there weren't any other like stuff that we put in that would have added new users. It could have been red team. It was probably red team, but like you were killing the process and then the process would come back.
I think so, but I think it was kind of our mistake too because we were trying to kill the system D, but I think that was a system process. But I'm just thinking that we should have probably just killed all of the SH files, and that would have pretty much killed all the files that were running from the cron jobs. I'm just
Hold up, I have my red team guy here.
So if you're killing the cron job process itself, it's probably going to be restarted by the service because cron job is a service, not necessarily a process. Well, it is a process, but the process is being run by a service, which you can view with systemctl or a similar command. If you're talking about an sh file, we did put a jerry.sh script in /opt. If you're talking about that one, that did create 100 Jerry users. So that could be something as well. It wasn't running in the background. I just ran it once. I should have ran it multiple times. But yeah, those are only areas that would have been adding users.
I think we saw another one called terminite.sh
Oh
that had
that's the cron job that was supposed to run.
oh okay.
Yeah. So would have been delete the cron job, kill the process, delete the file, and then that should have cleaned up everything. All right. Okay. Unfortunately, we have to cut it short. If you do have any questions, make sure you put them on the Discord. But there's probably a class starting soon, so if you haven't signed up for today's meeting, make sure you sign up. But other than that, thank you, everyone.